Okay, yeah, just go ahead and sit down.
Good morning. Excuse me. There is a car, BD, with the Tennessee plates, BDY 9822, white car, that is in the Grizzlies Prep parking lot, and we really don't want you to get towed. It's a white, maybe Mercedes. Sorry. There you are. Now we'll carry on.
Hello and welcome to Calvary. My name is Kristen Lynch. I'm the organist choir master here. And it's a great privilege to welcome you to this space, as well as our guest musicians, Basil Alter on violin and Christina Lai on piano. So we're thrilled to have them here. On Thursdays, we've been featuring musicians of the Memphis community for the past several years, sponsored by the Calvary Friends of Music. Because Calvary believes that, like on the front cover of your leaflet that says that we have things for the nourishment of your body and soul here in this space, music is one of those things that is quite nourishing to our souls. And so this year, particularly fun about it is that while we are recognizing 100 years of this great series, not only are we looking back, but musically we're looking forward to those musicians who are leading us into the next 100 years. You'll read a little bit about each of them, Basil and Christina, in your leaflet, but it's a particular treat to welcome Basil back after having studied at Manhattan School of Music for quite some time, and Christina to welcome her to the Memphis community where she's established herself with the Prism Ensemble and quickly as a collaborative pianist, which we're always glad to have. So I invite you to silence your cell phones. because this next piece is a real special piece, and let us let go of any distractions so that the silence and music can be gifts as we together create sacred space.
Please stand as you're able and join in singing hymn 680 found in your blue hymnal. Please be seated. I'm Paul McLean, Associate Rector here at Calvary, and on behalf of the people of Calvary, the many volunteers for our Lenten preaching series in Waffle Shop, welcome to our 100th anniversary of this series, which is amazing. And it's our gift to the city and to the world, and your presence is a gift to us. As Kristen reminded you a moment ago, please silence your cell phones. And also, if you had difficulty parking today, you are welcome to park at St. Mary's Episcopal Cathedral parking lot, 700 Poplar. And we have a continuous shuttle going there, and we're grateful to all our partners who are making that happen. So that's available to you on subsequent days here. And as you're making your way out, we hope you'll stop by our great hall, where the Thistle and Bee Ministry, a wonderful ministry helping women make transitions from sex trafficking to careers in making herbal teas, honey products, and other things. It's a wonderful social enterprise. They'll have a lot of their products available for sale, along with the Episcopal Bookshop, one of our partners at St. Mary's. Books by many of our authors, as well as many gift items available in the Great Hall. And then you can make your way downstairs to the Waffle Shop, our way of doing penance during Lent, with such desserts as Boston cream pie, which may or may not have a little rum in it. Who knows? And always it's like a citywide reunion, really, at the Waffle Shop, and it's become larger than our city as well. So encourage you to enjoy that if you haven't already. It's a delight to have Christina and Basil with us today. That prelude was just so moving, and we're honored to have your presence today. Thank you so much for that. I feel like we've already worshiped, and but more is yet to come. And it's a delight, it's been a delight the last couple of days to have Rabbi David Wolpe here with us. And those of you who were yesterday, of course, you got to hear Barbara Brown Taylor, one of our favorites here. And we asked Barbara, as we were preparing for the 100th anniversary, who would you like to see us get other than yourself? She said, I want you to get Rabbi David Wolpe, and I want him to preach the same week I'm here, so I get to hear him. And she's right there. You can read his bio, but we got to know him, some of us got to know him fairly intimately. We did a 6-week study here, and then we just completed a 4-week study at the Tresvant Retirement Village on his book, Making Loss Matter, Creating Meaning in Difficult Times, and where he not only brings us deeper into the Old Testament characters, but he brings us into his own journey with loss and that of his family and those around him. And it took us into loss and creating meaning in a very distinct way. And what I came out of the thing is that creating loss is more of a communal activity than we think it is. We think of it that we have to find meaning in loss, that we really find it together with God and with each other. And David, I thank you for that and for the journey that you've helped us on in that regard. David will come and speak to us right after more of our beautiful meditation music and our scripture reading. A reading from the book of Genesis. When Israel set out on his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. God spoke to Israel in visions in the night and said, "Jacob, Jacob." And he said, "Here I am." Then he said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again, and Joseph's own hand shall close your eyes."
It's long been my practice that I received from my father, who was a rabbi, to take my watch off before I speak. And my father once told me the story that a man brought his friend to synagogue who wasn't Jewish, and he said, "I'll explain everything to you." They opened the ark. He explained what the ark was. They took out the scriptures. He explained what the Torah was. The rabbi got up to speak and took off his watch, and his friend said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "Oh, that doesn't mean anything." So please don't let this encourage you in any way. I want to begin with a story about a Jewish grandmother before I get to scriptures. When I was a kid, they used to tell this story about a Jewish grandmother whose grandson comes back from college and calls and says, "Grandma, I haven't seen you in so long. I want to come over. Just tell me, how do I get to your apartment?" And she says, "Well, this is what you do. You come to the door, and with your elbow, you hit 301. The door will open. You go inside. With your elbow, you hit the upper button for the elevator. Then you'll walk down the hall to my door, and with your elbow, you'll hit the buzzer, and I'll open the door, and you'll see me." And he says, "That's wonderful, but why am I hitting all the buttons with my elbows?" And she said, "You're coming empty-handed?" So I realize I am coming here with very full hands, and it's hard to decide if you say, "Come and speak from your tradition," and you have one chance to speak to people who aren't of your tradition about your tradition, what do you talk about? So instead of taking a single scriptural passage, I'm going to take a theme and illustrate it with 3 biblical characters, and I hope that will give it a coherence and a sense that will tell you something that I think both of our traditions share. I'm going to begin with Jacob. Jacob, as you recall, is not starting out the most admirable character in the Bible. He cheats his old blind father, right, by either coercing or stealing the birthright from his brother Esau. And then when his brother says, "I'm going to kill you," he runs away. Many years later, he hears that Esau, he's now married, he has kids, he hears Esau is coming with 400 men. And you don't come with 400 men to say hello, right? And Jacob then has this very memorable encounter where it's the middle of the night. It says in the Hebrew, "Vayivater Yaakov levado," Jacob was left alone. "Vayeyavek ishimo ad alot hashachar," and a man struggled with him until the coming of the dawn. Now, given that he's alone, generally the interpretation is it was an angel. Some modern interpretations say it was his conscience. Any way you want to go is fine. But this is what interests me about it, is what happens, as you recall, is the angel says, "You got to let me go, the dawn is coming," because apparently there's some vampiric element to angels, and they can't, they can't have breakfast. So he says, "You have to let me go," and Jacob says, "Then you've got to bless me." And the angel says, "What's your name?" Now, why does the angel say, "What's your name?" Because remember, the last time someone said to Jacob, "What's your name?" he didn't tell the truth. He said, "My name is Esau." So first I want to see if you'll tell me the truth. He says, "I'm Jacob," and then he says, "Your name is now Israel." Now, as a rabbi, For many, many years, I've had a lot of people ask me for blessings. And generally, what people want is blessing for health, for children, for prosperity, for safety, for ease. But if someone had come to me for a blessing and I had said to them, "You are no longer Fred, you are now Ernie," they would have said, "What kind of blessing is that?" But that's exactly what the angel does to Jacob. He says, "You're no longer Jacob now, you're Israel." But the blessing that he's giving him is the blessing of self-transformation. The blessing that he's giving him is the belief that who you are today does not have to be who you are tomorrow. And this proves to be exactly what happens when the next day Jacob goes and meets his brother Esau. And they fall on each other's necks and they cry and kiss. And I want to ask you, why doesn't Esau kill him? Why doesn't he? And here, I want to revert again to my father, who gave what I think is the most beautiful interpretation of this passage imaginable. He said, remember, in the ancient world, people never did what you have already done 20 times today, which is see themselves. There were no mirrors. And remember, Narcissus, who falls in love with himself, he does it by looking in a pond. Have you ever tried to see yourself in water? You can't really see yourself very well. And Jacob and Esau were twins. They weren't identical twins, but they were twins, which means that for the first time in decades, they looked into each other's eyes and they saw themselves. And they realized how many years, how old they were, and how many years they'd wasted in hatred. And that idea that by transforming yourself, you also give the other the opportunity to transform themselves, that, I would say, is the undercurrent that runs through the Bible. Jacob's son Joseph is also not a particularly admirable character at the beginning of his life. He has dreams that his brothers and his parents bow down to him, which already tells you something about his personality. But even more, then he goes and tells them, "Oh, guys, I had this dream that you all bow down to me. Now I have 3 brothers. Believe me, if I said to them, I had a dream that you all bowed down to me, they would have something to say about that. They wouldn't sell me into slavery. They're nice, my brothers, but the brothers sell him into slavery. I'm going to abbreviate the story, and he ends up in prison. He interprets the dream of the baker and the cupbearer. Then he ends up second only to Pharaoh, and he interprets Pharaoh's dreams. So the rabbis ask the question, Joseph fell by dreams and he rose by dreams. What was the difference? The difference is he fell when he could only hear his own dreams. He rose when he started to listen to the dreams of others. In other words, self-transformation. When Joseph became a different person, his life changed, and he changed the people around him. He changed his brothers, even without their knowing it. And all of this is a sort of prelude for the person I want to spend the most time on, whose transformation is in many ways the most significant because he's the most significant person in my tradition and in the Torah, and that's Moses. So when Moses is born, there's a really fascinating little nuance in the Hebrew about when the Pharaoh's daughter comes to rescue him by the Nile. It says in the Hebrew, "V'hinei na'ar bocheh," which means, "and behold, a child crying." Now, any of you who have ever had children know that you don't first see the kid crying, right? You hear the kid crying. But, according to one rabbinic interpretation, Moses couldn't cry out loud. Because he cries out loud, he's going to be found, he's going to be killed. So he cries silently. And we learn at the very beginning of Moses' life something that he will tell us in a minute, which is he has some kind of trouble with articulation. Moses doesn't, if you've ever had a kid, you've used this phrase, Moses doesn't use his words. You know how when children hit, you say, use your words? Moses doesn't use his words. How do we know this? In all of Moses' upbringing, we hear nothing that he has said. He grows up in Pharaoh's palace, not a single sentence, not a single word do we have from him. The first thing he does is he sees an Egyptian hitting a Jew. Now, if you saw an Egyptian hitting a Jew, what's the first thing you would do? You'd say, stop that. Moses doesn't do that. Instead, he kills the Egyptian. The Hebrew is vayach et hamitzri. And I'll tell you later on why I told you the Hebrew. It's going to recur in a minute. The same thing happens when he sees two Jews. He discovers that what he has done is known. He goes off. He hasn't said anything to anyone. And then he rescues Tzipporah, who is going to be his wife, from these marauding shepherds in Midian. And she goes home and she says, I met this Egyptian. Now, why does she think he's an Egyptian? Obviously, because he hasn't said anything. Because he's just done something and he's dressed like an Egyptian. And then God comes to him at the burning bush and says, go to Pharaoh. And first he says, I don't want to. He makes all sorts of excuses. And finally he says, I don't talk right. And the Hebrew here is, I am not a man of divarim. Divarim means words. In Hebrew, by the way, it also means things, which is interesting. We're not going to go there, but it means words. Okay? Lo ish divarim anochi. I am not a man of words. I never was, and I'm still not. That's what he says. At which point, God gets kind of upset and says, basically, I'll tell you who has words and who doesn't, and allows Aaron to go with him as a sort of mouthpiece. Moses, though, has always been characterized by action, not by words. And he's uncomfortable with words. And even through the plagues, he initiates the plagues by actions, not by speaking. And then finally, you come to Sinai. The Israelites have been liberated. They come to the pinnacle of Jewish history, and God gives what we call the Ten Commandments. But you know what they're called in the Bible? They're called Aseret, which means 10, Hadivarim, the 10 words. Moses, who is not a person of Divarim, is given the 10 Divarim, the 10 words. So it's almost as if God is saying, well, maybe you're not a person of words, but I work with words. That's what I do. And Moses takes those words and goes down the mountain, and what does he do with them? He smashes them at the foot of the mountain. Now, if you're Moses, and granted, every right to be upset at the golden calf. I'm not suggesting for a minute he should have been happy. But you're holding the most valuable thing that has ever existed. The tablets that God gave you. The average person would put them down, right? And go and yell at the Israelites. If you come home and your kids have misbehaved, you don't take the most valuable thing in the house and smash it and then yell at the kids. They've already smashed it. So instead, but that's not what Moses does. He takes the most valuable thing that has ever been and he destroys it. And it is a reinforcement of this idea that I am not a person of words. I don't work with words. And if we didn't get the idea by then, we get the idea when we come to Moses' great sin. Because what is Moses' great sin? Why is he, at least in theory, not allowed to go into the land of Israel? Because in the book of Numbers, when God says to him, speak to the rock and water will flow, he hits the rock. By the way, the Hebrew is vayach et hasela. That's, he hits the rock. And those who remember or who paid attention back then when he hit the Egyptian, it's the same word, vayach et hamitzri. Moses is always yaching when he should be talking, and it finally caught up with him, and God said, you are not the right person to lead them into the land, because you don't know how to use words. And remember, once Moses is gone, what are they going to have left of him? Words. And so Moses finds out that he can't go into the land, and then you come to the fifth book of the Bible. The fifth book of the Bible, which most of you know as Deuteronomy, is not called Deuteronomy in Hebrew. In Hebrew, do you know what the fifth book of the Bible is called? It's called Divarim. And it's entirely the speech of Moses. And Moses, who starts out as not a man of Divarim, becomes literally, and here I'm using the word literally as in literally, the man of Divarim. The book of the Bible that is his is called Divarim. And he learns that words are what will outlast him. And the only thing that they will carry forth of Moses, after all, is his story, and the stories are composed of words. And his self-transformation is to learn the kind of leader he needed to be. But it took him a long time to get there. But he needed to be a leader who could use words in a way that would stir the hearts of the Israelites long after he was gone. And I want to close by telling you a Hasidic story, because this idea that words are central to the Jewish tradition and to the human experience, but certainly central to the Jewish tradition, you might understand because we wandered. We don't have vast cathedrals. If you go to Europe, there are beautiful churches. There aren't very many beautiful synagogues. And the one thing that we always carried with us, the portable culture, is the culture of words. Right? The reason that you're a people of the book is because books are portable. Buildings aren't portable. Images aren't portable always, but words from parents to children. So here is a beautiful Hasidic story. I think it's a beautiful story that actually used to be told about the Baal Shem Tov, and we had some music that originated with the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of the movement of Hasidism. So the story goes that when the Baal Shem Tov needed a miracle, he would go to a particular place in the forest, he would light a special candle, he would say a special blessing, and God would work the miracle for him. In time, with his disciple, the candle had been burnt out, and his disciple, who then led the community, would go to the spot in the forest, say the blessing, and get the miracle. Generations passed, and in later generations, the Baal Shem Tov's disciple, who now was 5 or 6 generations after him, would sit in his office when the Jewish people were in trouble, and he would look up at the heavens and he would say, "Dear God, the candle has long since burnt out. We don't know the spot in the forest anymore, and we've even forgotten the blessing. But I remember the story, and that has to be enough." And God would work the miracle. Again and again, people have transformed themselves not only through what they've done, but through what they've said, through encounters with others, through words that we speak, through words that we hear from God and speak to God. The story of self-transformation is the story, certainly, of the Jewish people, and I think of all people of faith. The promise that tomorrow You don't have to be the same person that you are today, which in the end is a statement of hope and of faith and of trust in God, who made us with a spark of the divine, and therefore we are inexhaustible and can always be made new. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Rabbi David will be here at the bottom of the stairs to greet you as you go. Being self-transformed through words, let us bless the Lord.
Yes, we're just starting a new thing, so it'll be perfect next week. I'll send you an email.
Right.
Hello, how are you? Nice to see you. I'm good. Yeah? Yeah. I've been at Temple. I know. Hi, I'm good. How are you?
You know, you're always welcome. I'm doing
Thank you so much for coming.
Have you read his last book? The David one? No, the one on deck. Hey! Yes. And he just signed it for me. Oh, good.